Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I would like to apologize for not being there in person to make this presentation. The reason being that I was told by FBI there is a significant threat to my life due to my strong support of the right to repair movement. And so I requested protection, but then I was denied because Secret Service said they are too busy covering the president-elect at the moment. And so the second choice was to send Jason there, but then Sodexo leadership objected because he is too valuable a person to take a risk to be there and be confused by the assassins with me. Although I told them that's not possible because he is a whole lot smarter and more handsome than me, but they still said no. So unfortunately, we have to do this virtually thanks to the great effort of the MD Expo team. And also we are not doing the raffle of my book because you already know who is the smarter and the more handsome of the two of us here. So let me then give the presentation to Jason because he's, as I said, smarter and more handsome of the two of us here. Okay, take it over, Jason.
All right. Thank you, Binseng. So today we're going to discuss the AEM program based on evidence-based maintenance. And here with me is, my clicker's not working, Dr. Binseng Wang. Dr. Binseng Wang, you want to introduce yourself?
No need for that, Jason. Okay. I am infamous already. Don't need more people coming after me.
All right. Well, I'm Jason Gibson. I'm the Director of Quality and Compliance for Sodexo Clinical Technology Management. I've been in this role for 3 years, been with Sodexo going on 7 years. I do a little bit of everything within the organization, from safety officer, radiation safety, laser safety, and I also lead the chair for our honor Atlanta Metro chapter. I am based out of the Brentwood, Tennessee office, and I've been in the field for over 20 years. We'll leave it at that. So Sodexo likes to start every meeting off with a safety moment. So keep socially distanced, maintain out of striking distance from a lightsaber. So please keep your distance. All right, what we're going to cover today is what is evidence-based maintenance, AEM planning, evaluating inventory, scheduled maintenance, corrective maintenance. We're going to go over AEM evaluation and the discussion and conclusion. Primary references for today, Dr. Binseng Wang's evidence-based maintenance of medical equipment. Other references will be listed here, and I believe this will be available post-program. So if you want to look that up. So evidence-based maintenance, start with a structure, i.e. Binseng's tackle, the process, which is fishing, and the outcome, which is catching the fish. So the right tools and the right process equal an outcome. Fundamental EBM questions. Why perform scheduled maintenance if it does not reduce failure or increase safety? Shouldn't I use my limited resources to focus on other CE duties? So what can we do? Help plan for better equipment purchase, better understand our equipment, take better care of our equipment, determine when it's needed, investigate patient incidents appropriately, address recalls properly, cybersecurity issues, which is really at the forefront today. So healthcare technology management is not just break fix, it's maintenance and management. So maintenance evaluations are primary goal for equipment maintenance, scheduled maintenance, safety and reliability. The Joint Commission speaks of the reliability as effectiveness for an AEM program. So therefore, safety evaluations determine if the maintenance strategy enhances the safety. So we're looking to not detract from the safety. We don't want to degrade the safety of our program. Reliability or effectiveness, again, determining if the maintenance strategy is actually enhancing the reliability. The golden standard here really is your OEM's planned maintenance for effectiveness, and they must prove how effective that is prior to bringing their products to the market. So root cause analysis, which I'm sure a lot of us have participated in throughout the years, requires a 5 questions of why. So your failure cause code kind of rolls all that up into one simple statement. Most RCAs are very time consuming, so the adaptation of the failure cause code allows our technicians to select from a limited options to determine the failure analysis. So like evidence-based medicine, evidence-based maintenance tries to address the failure, the root cause of, and uses the outcomes to determine which one works best. So failure cause codes. These here that are circling in red, service-induced failures, hidden failures, potential failures, preventable and predictable failures are the ones that we control. So we're going to control the controllables. These are basically the bread and butter in helping to determine the effectiveness of an AEM program. The use could be, it's not just user error or use error. The use cause code could be anything from power-related issues that maybe your facility maintenance engineer could help with, or the addition of a UPS, potential dirt, oil, and air supply line. These are not typically in our reach, so that's where it's at. The utilization of failure cause codes requires a significant amount of education to the technician. With any cause code, a standardized definition that applies across the board is paramount to success of the interpretation of the data. So it's not just, I guess, throwing a code down or having a large variety of codes. It's understanding the codes that we're going to be using, or we are using, in order to help measure the effectiveness. So, and also recently, Amy released a white paper calling Optimizing the CMMS Failure Code Services. So it looks like we may be getting standardized soon, hopefully. So what we're looking at currently here is for scheduled maintenance for single equipment type from one hospital. This is for 24 months. So what we're looking at is convince ourselves that they're a consistent pattern. Can you predict what happens, or how can you predict what happens? It's not necessarily all random. It is somewhat randomness to an extent. So for example, if you go to a casino, which I'm sure no one here does, and there's weighted dice at a casino, so you actually have better odds of it landing on that 6 that you're looking for. So while this may not be a perfect scenario for weighted dice, it is less random than normal, and we are able to predict this to a degree. So this is, again, single equipment type for one hospital, corrective maintenance for 24 months. Cannot duplicate, which is technically a legacy for no problem found. At the end of 24 months, we captured the average standardization and average and standardized deviations. While yes, there is variability, they all do line up within that standard deviation window to help find a common fault. So service-induced and preventable and predictable failures are practically non-existent. Those are the 2 on the right-hand side of the screen. Excuse me real quick. All right, so annual failure probability. Annual failure probability is finding a particular class of failures. So what we're looking at for scheduled maintenance is cause codes, which again, evident failure, preventable failure. and hidden failure. And what we're looking at to come up with the probability here is the number of these codes divided by the number of scheduled maintenance completed. So for cost codes, for corrective maintenance, cost codes, which include unpreventable failures, failures induced by use, preventable and predictable failures, and service-induced failures. This will be calculated out by the number of these codes divided by the number of corrective maintenance completed times the equipment type failure rate. So the ACC, BAT, and NET are calculated both and added them up. To go back for your corrective maintenance failure, give you a quick example on that is if you have 500 repairs on infusion pumps and you have 1,000 devices, your failure rate for a 12-month period would be 50%. So no failure or no problem found is basically the difference between all failure probabilities, 1 minus all failure to sum. So failure cost codes here, we have a single channel infusion pumps. This is, again, at one hospital. And what this is showing us for 24 months. So on the left-hand side, you can see that no problem found is about 30%, while battery use is 45 to 50% of the problems. So this is, again, this is a snapshot of your equipment for the current maintenance strategy. If you change maintenance strategies, this will become your baseline for determining the effectiveness. Again, looking at batteries, digging into that, why are the batteries failing? Is it battery selection? Is it the manufacturer of the batteries? Could it possibly be there's not enough outlets in the utility rooms to keep these plugged in and charged? There's many possible outcomes that could be cause of this. So this is going to allow you to look at your data and become a proactive partner with your facility. It's not just the items that we can control, which are pretty controlled as far as the items to the right, but this will help you be a proactive partner. Excuse me. All right, so failure cost codes data. So single equipment type, multiple hospitals. What we're looking at here is there's some variability across the different facilities, but there is enough data to make actual decisions across the entire platform, so you can increase reliability and safety. The comparable data will help anyone measure the effectiveness of their program. So how do you stack up? So from a large swath of data, many different hospitals, how does your program stack up? So again, taking the previous measurements and do a compare and contrast and see if there are some changes that need to be made. Again, high level of no failure or no problem found could be a great opportunity to dig in and look at the data and see, is there opportunity for education? Is there equipment design that may need to bring to the OEM's attention that it's not working as intended, or it's not perceived to be working as intended? So maintenance effectiveness evaluation with EBM. So this is showing several OEM hospitals as compared to a AEM maintenance strategy from other hospitals. Again, the OEM is what I would consider the gold standard. So that being a level playing field, it should be evenly applied across the board. This allows you to look and see how well your maintenance program compares to an OEM style maintenance program. If you look at the average from one group to another, the groups are within standard deviation from each other. So with these overlaps, it's basically meaning that they're all within the standard deviation, so they all are appropriate for use. Maintenance outcomes and analysis. This is your scheduled maintenance versus repair replace. Again, when you look at telemetry transmitters, exam lights, aspirators, Dopplers, most of these items are not what we consider true preventive maintenance. There are very little, if no, replacement parts recommended on a routine basis by the manufacturer. So it's fairly level playing field across the board on this type of scheduled maintenance versus repair or replace. So some of these items, again, they could potentially fall off into the repair replace maintenance strategy. So again, looking at saving our time, our valuable resources, and putting their resources to where we could use more attention. So AEM planning. So we're going to cover scheduled maintenance, corrective maintenance, and again, evaluating the inventory. So scheduled maintenance is also known as planned maintenance, preventive maintenance, again, proactive. There's a whole host. Our goal here with scheduled maintenance is to actually enhance the reliability of our equipment. So again, improve patient safety and care. The objectives, again, reduce preventive failures, detect failures in progress, and detect hidden failures. These are oftentimes overlooked by the staff who use them on a day-to-day basis. So the goal is to make sure that, again, it's operating as intended. Corrective maintenance, also known as unscheduled, corrective, repair, reactive. Our goal here is to restore the equipment to its operating conditions as intended by the OEM for safety and functionality. Again, what are we looking at here? Reducing downtime, detecting failure causes to prevent other actions, detecting failures in progress, and hidden failures. So after we do a repair, we want to make sure that we do a safety and performance evaluation of every device. So for evaluating your inventory, initially you're going to want to review your entire inventory. You can exclude the low cost, non-durable devices. These are items such as, again, suction regulators, surgical instruments, otoscopes. You can exclude this as far as your inventory for devices that are required OEM mandates. We all know CLIA, imaging devices is required by CMS, blood bank. There's many others that could be excluded. And also look at your OEM service contracts because they're mandated by the FDA to perform OEM service on their equipment. And lastly, we're going to look at all the remaining equipment that can be placed into the AEM program, but with some precautions. So what we want to take into account is devices that what we consider true preventive maintenance. It's not just a safety and functions check. We're looking at items that require repair or replacement, routine replacement of wear and tear type items. All equipment designed or deployed exclusively for neonates. Again, this is up to 5 years old, and anything that's that you would classify as critical should be following the OEM recommendations unless there is extensive evidence. Apologize here, I'm having a little bit of an issue with my Right, so all SPIs recommended by OEMs, regardless of whether they are in addition to true preventive maintenance or otherwise, can be extended if there's clear evidence. Again, NFPA 99/2012, if your hospital has adopted that, you can exclude the electrical safety testing. So maintenance strategy planning, we're looking at scheduled maintenance. These are parts with predictable deterioration. Again, the preventive true PM, safety and performance inspections are the other type of planned maintenance. Those are there really to catch any of the hidden or potential failures. Ensure that your scheduled maintenance is adopted as a function of technology used. So again, examples of that are ventilators, very mechanical. It's going to have a lot of moving parts, a lot of replacement parts. Old school film processors, I haven't seen anybody doing silver recovery in quite some time. So that's saving us a lot of time and energy once we switch to digital x-rays. Again, increased severity does not necessarily mean we're going to increase scheduled maintenance. So for the corrective maintenance, review your repair, replace. Oftentimes, if the cost to repair a device is 50 or 25% greater than the replacement cost, it's a good idea to just go ahead and replace it. Some examples, again, patient monitors based on solid state electronics, infusion pumps. So references for these, again, service literature, technical bulletins, past experience, and shared experience among other hospital or groups of hospital. All right, and we're going to flow into the AEM evaluation, and let's see if we can hand this off successfully.
Okay, thank you, Jason. Let me try to address the evaluation portion of this presentation. And I'm going to quote President Dwight Eisenhower, in part because we are near the Veterans Day. This is also a recognition of all the veterans out there. But what President Eisenhower said, because he was the commander of Allied forces in the Europe theater during the Second World War, he said that in preparation for battle, I always found that plans are useless, but planning is indispensable. What does that mean? It means that you plan, but sometimes things change last minute. And if you know your planning process, you can adapt to the changes very quickly, easily. So good planning and 100% task completion does not guarantee good outcome. You have to evaluate how well your planning, your process worked out ultimately. It's just like you go to a good school and you sit there every day of the classes, but that does not necessarily mean that you learn something. That's why they want to quiz you and subject you to exams in order to prove that you have learned something. Okay, so we have two types of evaluations: safety evaluation and effectiveness evaluation. Safety evaluation means that you have to look at all the patient incidents, and whenever possible, I would recommend that you include the close calls or near misses, because that will help you understand why something goes wrong and what can you do to reduce those risks. And then every single one of these incidents, you should look at the cause of the failure, as Jason presented before, and assign a failure cause code. Okay. Then for the 4 special codes that are maintenance related, the service-induced failure, hidden failure, potential failure, and predictable and preventable failures, we need to go one step further, because now we're talking about incidents, so we cannot just assign a code and forget about it and just move on. No, we need to dig in a little deeper and understand whether the problem, the cause of the problem is due to an individual or is due to your maintenance strategy, your AEM, in other words. Okay, this will help you distinguish the way to resolve this problem, reduce this risk in the future by either If it's individual, you have to retrain the person or discipline the person if the person routinely miss something, or change your maintenance strategy. Could be that a frequency, or could be a particular task that needs to be added, etc., to your AEM. So here is an example of what I did before in another independent service organization during the period of 10 years, 2004 to 2013. There were a number of there's over 500 reported patient incidents, including some that were actually killed patient. There was 74 deaths included, but we were only allowed to investigate 476, in other words, 92%, because some hospitals are very particular about their possible litigation issues, concerns, etc. So we were stopped from doing further investigation. But by going through the failure cause code process and digging into deeper into the individual versus the overall procedure maintenance strategy, we were able to finally decide that of all those incidents, 200 and some were related to equipment, but only 6 were related to equipment maintenance issues. And this 10-year period, the company performed more than 10 million services, including scheduled maintenance as repairs, because the number of pieces of equipment that was maintained during that period of time was almost 10 million pieces of equipment. Okay, so let's take a better look. So this is the analysis of the failure root causes. Okay, and as I said before, very small amount was 1.26 to 6 of the 500 some that we had reported was actually 4 involving service-induced failures and 2 involving potential and predictable failures. One example was a ventilator that stopped functioning when the nurse unplugged it, and in the process of trying to take the patient from ICU to imaging department to get a CT scan of that patient. As soon as she unplugged the ventilator stopped working, despite of the fact that it was equipped with an internal battery and supposed to be usable for short transportation between the ICU and the imaging department. And the investigation found later on that it was not just a battery that failed, that would be classified here, but a service-induced failure because the ventilator was serviced a week before, and after the ventilator was serviced, the person forgot to reconnect the battery to the lead of that particular ventilator. So obviously when the power was turned off by unplugging the ventilator, the battery was not able to power the ventilator, and therefore the vent stopped and the patient had to be bagged manually and then the ventilator replaced in order to keep the patient alive. Okay, so this is a good example why the safety and performance inspection needs to be performed after any repair, because something else may be hidden there. In this case, there was a oversight by the service person and ultimately contributed to the demise of the patient. The patient died a few days later, not as a direct consequence of the ventilator failure, but the ventilator failure probably contributed to it. So this is why you need to be very careful about what you do, how you document that, how you investigate that, etc., etc. And then learn from how to revise your procedures to catch this kind of situation. In this case, it was a training fail that was needed to address the failure of that particular person. In this case, actually turned out to be a OEM's field service representative and not a third party, but that does not mean anything special because human errors are common and sometimes very difficult to avoid. Okay, so the conclusion of this process was that the number of maintenance-related failures that cause patient incident is extremely small, and this is the same conclusion that the FDA arrived after studying many records, their own MedWatch reports, as well as others submitted by manufacturers and independent service organizations, and had decided not to regulate service companies for at least for the time being, until they have further evidence of issues that require attention. Okay, so let's move on to the next one. It's what we call reliability evaluation. Technically speaking, CMS require evaluation of your AEM for safety and effectiveness. This is like the vaccine that is currently being studied, tested for use against COVID-19. The manufacturers have to first go through a safety test in order to prove that the vaccine is not going to cause problems, sickness to the patients, and then have to prove that the vaccine is effective. It's going to really antibodies, antigens in your body to combat the COVID virus if it comes into the patient. We don't have a patient test here for us to evaluate effectiveness. We are not going to apply the equipment on a patient to see whether this piece of equipment is going to cure the patient or keep the patient alive or something like that. That is way beyond the call of our duty. So what we are trying to do is to substitute the effectiveness by reliability, because if the equipment that we maintain has been proven to be reliable when it's used, it's going to, in other words, meet the expectation specifications of the original manufacturer when they proved to the satisfaction of the FDA that the piece of equipment is effective in terms of treating a patient. So we are going to focus on reliability. So we want to see again these 4 types of causes of failures and see what kind of problems we have, whether we have any particular issues, unusual problems, etc., etc. So after that, we are going to look into again whether this is the problem is due to an individual who is forgetting about something, lapse or slip, or intentionally doing something wrong despite of the training of the mandate by the hospital or the government. And the other possibility is that the AEM strategy that you adopted is not good enough, and you have to revise that in order to improve the safety and reliability of that piece of code. These 2 things, safety and reliability, they go hand to hand because there's no safety without reliability and vice versa. And if you have 50% or more of the failure cause goes due to later conditions, you definitely have to check your AEM strategy and revise it. Okay, let me give you, before I go further, don't rely on the overall mean time between failure as many people have done in the past, and maybe still today, because many failures, as Jason mentioned before, are not predictable or preventable. For example, failure of your finger pulse oximeter finger probe, it's not a equipment failure, it's an accessory failure, and maybe because the material management people decided to buy a cheap knockoff that is really cheap, but also not very reliable. So that has nothing to do with your equipment's mean time between failure. You need to distinguish the cause of the failure in order to be able to determine what's the best course of action to correct that problem. So let me try to give you an example to be more specific. Excuse me. We studied a small group of hospitals with 3 satellite sites, and in a 3-year period, with a small inventory, only about 8,000 pieces of equipment. And these are the number of corrective maintenance and preventive maintenance that were performed there. And the analysis showed that there was a group of equipment that had a very high hidden failure rate. The number of work orders is double digits instead of single digit like the rest. And the question is why this is the case. And the more interesting part is that this particular maintenance strategy that was adopted was actually uh, using strictly the manufacturer recommended scheduled maintenance. Nothing was changed. So why this type of equipment is failing more often than necessary? So we further investigated the cause of this problem and turned out that this piece of equipment was failing because a particular part of the equipment, component of the equipment, was failing before the maintenance schedule recommended by the manufacturer. This was a oxygen concentrator. In the old days, the oxygen concentrator when it first came out without the indicator for the oxygen concentration. You had to measure the concentration separately with the oxygen meter. And turned out that the molecular sieve in these oxygen concentrators were deteriorating faster. In 5 years, they were dying off, whereas the manufacturer recommended replacement only every 10 years. And the problem, after discussing with the manufacturer, we found out that this is because this long-term care facility was an older building, had more dust and more humidity than typically comparable to acute care hospitals, and therefore the molecular sieve beds were dying in 5 years. So we had to actually increase the frequency of the real preventive maintenance here in order to prevent this kind of problems from happening. And this also makes us point here that AEM sometimes is not going to save you labor or parts, because sometimes you have to actually perform more services than recommended by the manufacturer because of your particular environmental issues or user issues, etc., etc. So AEM does not necessarily save you money, but it will save you patients, will save you from lawsuits about patients being hurt. So bottom line here is that when you learn from your safety and reliability evaluations, you learn that you have problems that you need to correct. As I said before, if they are committed by individuals, you need to retrain them. You have to see whether your work instructions need to be changed. You may have to discipline them if they systematically ignore your instructions, or it is maybe a latent condition that is built into your service procedure. Your scheduled maintenance or corrective maintenance procedure may have something that is not there that you need to change your AEM or your supervision of your staff, even sometimes external people. In other words, the old plan, do, check, act circle of continual improvement is exactly what we are trying to do here. This is actually also known as the scientific method that is using science to prove something that is right or wrong. Okay, so let's try to wrap this up so we can give you time for questions and discussions here. So one thing we have to recognize that we imitated the name of evidence-based medicine because we wanted to use a term, a concept that is familiar to our clinical colleagues and also the administrators. But we cannot really do exactly everything identically because people is more complex than equipment. Equipment was designed by persons, and we have some reasonable understanding of the reasoning technology behind it. Equipment also does not suffer from the psychosomatic effects. In other words, I don't have to give a placebo to a piece of equipment for it to think that we gave it a real drug. But also, I cannot blindfold clinical engineering professionals, biomeds, when we ask them to perform a service. Okay, that will probably cause more problems than solving the problem. So we cannot really do the so-called double-blind randomized clinical trial process, but we can do this, what is called in clinical field cohort studies. In other words, you give two groups of patients two different types of drugs, for example, and then you or it could be a placebo and compare the outcomes. And this is a perfectly acceptable evidence-based medicine method. And this is what we are doing really in automating analysis in evidence-based maintenance here. And also, I want to correct some perhaps misunderstanding out there that it is difficult to get accurate and reliable data because people are difficult to train, and very often people don't understand statistics and how to calculate mean and standard deviation and make comparisons. I think that is probably a little bit of overstatement because we are not talking about fancy statistics here. We are not talking about quantum mechanics. We are not talking about none of that kind of high level. You don't need to understand general relativity or even uh, basic relativity. You just need to be able to calculate mean and standard deviation and explain to your team what does that mean to be a evident failure, what is a hidden failure, etc. The fact that it's difficult does not mean that we should stop doing it. As President Kennedy said quite a long time ago, we choose to go to the moon not because it was easy, because it was hard, but by doing that, by having this goal, we will learn to organize ourselves, do things that we were not able to do, and then gain the benefits of accepting this challenge. If it were not for the moonshots, we would not have today a lot of the diagnostic and therapeutic procedures, solid state electronics, internet, etc., that we have today. So the moonshot is definitely something that we should try to get. In other words, we want to not just do things right, but do the right things right for the lowest possible cost because we are under severe constraint of availability of resources. Thank you for your attention. Jason and I are available now for your questions, comments,